guys, my name is Jody and I want to welcome you to week 3 of The Dream. I'm so glad you're at group this week. But before we dive into the teaching for this week, I want to offer you some ideas for your group as we approach the just over halfway point of the study. You know, serving together as a group could be one of the most memorable and impactful things ever to do together. Did you know here at Cypress that we have local partnerships with all kinds of opportunities to serve in our community? In fact, in March as a church, we're making a special effort to get out and love on our city. We have serving opportunities lined up for every day of the month. For a list of those partnership and serving opportunities, head over to cypresschurch.tv/outreach. Our hope is to see all of our groups here at Cypress making serving together a top priority this semester. Also, don't forget to keep taking photos of your group and posting them to social media using #TheDreamGroup. We want to see your group in action as you meet together, serve together, have fun together, and do life together. With that, let's go ahead and pause the video and read Genesis 41 before we check out today's teaching from Pastor Rick.
Hey, welcome to week 3. You know, today we're going to start out talking about success and failure. Most people are not prepared for success. There are so many tragic stories of founders with startup companies that skyrocketed, making piles of cash. They then purchased supercars that they could not control and literally drive them off a cliff. The pinnacle of their success actually causes their end. Or think about a person who's won the lottery and 5 years later they're bankrupt. But there's even more tragic stories of those with big success and weak character. They use their new profound power and their position to take advantage of others. Their actions are self-centered and they don't care much for others. And it's not just them. Sometimes they use their measure of success and we act the same way. Significance impacts other people. The challenge is maintaining a serving and a hopeful heart no matter the circumstances. The story of Joseph is one of my personal favorites. Here's a quick summary of his life. Serving his dad to check on his brothers, he was sold into slavery. Serving Potiphar's house, they falsely imprisoned him. Serving in prison, he was forgotten. Serving his king and his country. Serving his family that betrayed him years earlier. When Joseph was back on top serving others, God came first. When Joseph was on the bottom serving others, God came first. He served faithfully in his home, in his prison, in his country. His service was always the same. It didn't matter where he was. I heard someone say once that they could identify more with Joseph if he was just a little bit more annoyed about his circumstances. Can you relate? His service and his attitude, really, they seem unbelievable. Joseph had something that sustained him through his circumstances. It's something that you and I also possess. The Lord was with Joseph. I love that. The Lord was with Joseph. While in Potiphar's house, we read in Genesis 39:2, the Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered. The Lord was with him. The Lord is with you in the worry, in the waiting, in the frustration, in the exhaustion. The Lord is with you. He's got this. Let that sink in just for a moment. He's got this and he's got you. In chapter 41, it says, after 2 full years passed. What a thing to think about. 2 full years passed. Joseph asked the cupbearer to remember him in the injustice he had experienced. It took 2 years, but the cupbearer finally remembered when Pharaoh had a dream. Joseph's consistency in serving, his reputation opened the door for greater service, which is also what happened to be the door to freedom. Just like Joseph, God has gifted and called each of us to serve him. Whether you find yourself in situations that are obscure or obvious, it's our job to serve him. Whether our circumstances is favorable or difficult, regardless of how we feel, regardless of what we think, regardless of what others say, our job is to live in obedience to God. When we do our part, God will do his part. And his part is so much greater than our part. When we read in Genesis 41:37-40, we see that Joseph's priorities were the same, but his position changed in an instant. But he was the same. Seek the consistency of heart, not the position. Jesus said in Luke 16:10, whoever can be trusted with very little can be trusted with much. Look at the little you have. Look at your position. Look at your influence, your significance. How can you be faithful to God in that? How can you be faithful to God in that? And at the same time, God elevated Joseph. Joseph was prepared. He was faithful in the pit and he was faithful in the prison. God knew that he would be faithful on Pharaoh's platform. To summarize Genesis chapter 41, verses 42 to 45, when Joseph was in the position of authority over his brothers, his heart was still the same, one bent on love, not revenge. This shows us that he had already settled the matter of forgiveness in his own heart. Genesis chapter 50 tells us that even after Joseph's father Jacob died, he still treated his brothers kindly. He still did. He still treated his brothers kindly. Joseph had a perspective of a way bigger picture. His brothers acted out of jealousy, selling him into slavery, and Joseph saw a purpose in the pain of his circumstances and the evil actions of his brothers. Joseph's experiences tested his character and his resolve. It's pretty cool. Those who walk humbly in low places likely walk humbly in high places. God can use the trouble in his life to build your character and to magnify his glory. When dreams are put on hold, it means there's other work that God wants to do first. Often, before God can work through you, he must work in you first. Let me say that again. Often, before God can work through you, he must work in you first. There are some people who you are over, and you are over some people. Is your heart's desire the same? To build them up, to add value, to love. When some people are given an opportunity or experience success, many times it goes to their head. They become proud. People who are honest about their success often see themselves just as fortunate or often just lucky. But there are those who use their influence, their position, their power, and their money for selfish reasons. Often they lack the character that's necessary for their situation. One of the most influential Christians in modern day time was Billy Graham. He met kings and presidents. He preached the gospel literally all over the whole world. Dr. Graham was received by believers and non-believers, elected officials, and tyrants. At his funeral, in front of our current president, dignitaries, viewers literally all over the whole world, his oldest son, Franklin Graham, said this: "There were not two Billy Grahams." Public and private, Billy Graham was the same humble servant, known by his family and by famous people. His life represented a stewardship of the gospel in his calling. And he wasn't in it for himself. There's another quote from that funeral that I love. Dr. Graham said this years before his death. He said, "Someday you will read and hear that Billy Graham is dead. But don't you believe it. I will be more alive than I am now. I will just have changed my address. I have gone into the presence of God." Talk about a man whose heart and his life were set on heavenly things. So Proverbs 4:23 says this: "Guard your hearts above all else, for it determines the course of your life." It literally determines the course of your life. It's pretty huge. As we looked at Joseph today, as we think about his life, there's so many great takeaways, so many good lessons from his life. One of those is it's a position of your heart, not your literal position, that determines your significance. Hey, thanks so much for being a part of week 3. Have a great discussion.